Okay, welcome back. This is now part three of our wheelchair lecture. I really did not anticipate needing three sections to get through all this material, but perhaps I'm being quite verbose. So we were talking about helping patients up and down an incline, and we talked about when descending or going down an incline, we want to make sure that we go backwards for the patient comfort and safety and keep all four wheels on the ground. Um, when we are going up and down curbs, we want to talk now about the ways to do that. Typically, having the patient facing forward is ideal going up a curb. As far as the patient's comfort level, we want to tip the wheelchair back into a wheelie type position, and so that we can get the front casters on the curb and then slowly roll the wheelchair forward until the large back wheels are in contact with the curb, then use our legs to lift the weight of the patient up the curb. We want to make sure that we maintain that contact with forward pressure so those wheels stay in contact with the curb throughout that movement. So we're not just lifting the patient straight up and potentially losing contact with the curb, as this can be a safety issue. So when we're going down a curb backwards, it's just the opposite of what we just discussed. We're going to be up on the sidewalk, walking backwards until we get right to the edge of the curb, and then very carefully and slowly and in a controlled manner lowering the patient down. We want to, again, keep that forward pressure so those large back wheels stay in contact with the curb until they come in contact with the ground below the curb. So again, very obvious to state, but you'll have the chance to experience this both in the wheelchair as the patient and as the therapist. But make sure that you're considering your feeble great grandfather or some older patient who is definitely dependent, and consider everything from their perspective. So here's another way to go up a wheelchair where the patient's facing forward. Um, and this often can be a little bit scary for the patient. We want to make sure we have them tilted back in a wheelie. And it's also often more challenging for the therapist to lift the weight of the patient in this manner. We're kind of at a mechanical disadvantage as we're behind them, but there are situations where this needs to happen this way. Now we're going down a curb with the patient facing forward. Again, also scary for the patient potentially. We have to really have them tilted far enough back that they don't feel at all like they could come forward out of the wheelchair. So you'll have the chance to experience this in lab on Monday and kind of see the pros and cons of each technique. Um, so the final thing we're going to talk about is up and down stairs in a wheelchair. I have never personally had to do this, and you probably won't either. It's a pretty atypical scenario where someone needs to get up or down stairs in a wheelchair. But if this needs to be done, the bottom bullet point's quite obvious. It not only can be, but typically will be frightening for patients. So three people are going to be raising and lowering the patient's body weight. Three able-bodied people, two on each side, one behind the wheelchair, and on three together, they would raise or lower the body weight of the patient. So again, you probably won't have to do this. I hope you won't ever have to do this. And if you do, you have to be very cautious and make sure all three people who are helping are on the same page. So to summarize our wheelchair lecture, we talked about the importance of the pelvis and having the proper alignment and positioning of the pelvis, which kind of sets the stage for the rest of the patient's posture and comfort and safety. That depending on where you are working, there are many, many different types of resources available. I've done both types of scenarios where I have been in an inpatient rehab facility where a wheelchair seating company visited the patient, asked me a few questions about the patient's physical abilities and cognition, and then they did all the measurements and ordered the wheelchair. I've also been the person to use a checklist. There's another document on Canvas that you can look at, kind of a seating checklist. I've also done that for patients where I've taken all the measurements and submitted them to a company, which then resulted in a wheelchair being fabricated and ordered for the patient. So hopefully watching these lectures and reading the associated chapter in your textbook before Monday will set you up to have a good experience and feel comfortable with all aspects of wheelchairs. Thank you very much. Adios.